And I would just like to start, when I think of Rob, who I've known a long time, I think of something. When I was little, I had this book called How to Do Nothing with Nobody, All Alone by Myself. It was like one of my favorite books. And I really wasn't into big group activities or camp or anything like this. And so now I'm circling around and I'm running like a camp-based do things with people kind of situation, which is very strange. But part of me still wants to just be alone in the studio all the time. But like I was telling Mark today, like I think this is really important. And one of my ongoing quotes is, "I wouldn't do this if it wasn't this." And I think of Rob as he was always quiet and mild-mannered and gentle and fiercely into painting. It just seemed like I remember him as a student in 2003, maybe in North Carolina, like one of my first teaching jobs as a poorly paid adjunct, and it just seemed like paint was oozing out of his fingertips. It was just the painterly side of it was in his nature. And several years later, when we started Mount Gretna School of Art, he was part of the first class here in 2013, and then went on to graduate school at Boston University. And then he couldn't help himself, came back for another summer to top it off. So now, we're almost 9 years later. He's a part of the Four Pillars Artist Residency, which is another service of the Mount Gretna School of Art, where we really try to pick up artists that are in that first 10 years, early career, trying to connect with new audiences and help get their work out there and their voices. And, it's also a fun way to re-attract our alumni to Mount Gretna. Maybe they're not going to school anymore, but they long to come back and be a part of it. And so he's been here for 4 weeks and 2.5 weeks left, and he's been helping take the edge off of some of my day-to-day operations. In addition, you might have seen him painting, like fiercely focused. He won't even see you if you walk by. And I'll also say he's been living in Raleigh, North Carolina for a while. He's worked at the Putney School summer program in Vermont for several years, and then does some art classes for middle schoolers around Raleigh, which got interrupted by COVID, I think. And he's here. Rob's here. And his lecture title is "Put This Design on Your Carpet," which I'm interested to hear what that's all about.
So thank you for having me. Thank you for being here. I wish that I was introducing Jay, actually, because he's been somebody who's meant so much to me for so long. So I went to undergrad school as pretty earnestly wanting to figure out more about drawing and painting, something that I started doing towards the end of high school. And I was just like, what is going on with this? And how can I learn more? So I showed up as pretty earnest, but also like an ignoramus. I didn't know a thing. And so very steep learning curve. And Jay helped me a lot. When I was in undergrad, I came to realize that there was a few people there who really made the program serious. And Jay was the faculty there that did that for me. And I never really planned on making any of my work. It just kind of happens, but none of it would have happened for sure without Jay. So it means a lot to be able to stand here and say that in person. Jay, thank you. There it is. That's a painting I made my last year at Western Carolina University. And I made this painting after a summer program at Chautauqua, where I got to meet the painter Stanley Lewis. And he's also a painter who forever changed the way that I approach painting and look at things. So this is about the time I started to do what I am doing now, which is kind of just showing up somewhere and starting to paint. And I guess I would say, looking at it now, that it seems to be more about the experience of seeing something and trying to recreate that experience in paint than it does about trying to really paint like an image of something. And I want to talk some about some of the paintings that I've admired and thought about throughout the years. So this is most definitely not my painting. But this is one of the first paintings that I saw that I was really like, yes, that's it. That's what I want to do. It's Chardin. And I think there's so much to see in there that every time I look at it, I see something new. I've been looking at it on and off for a while. I think there's also something strangely personal about it, this kind of thing that somebody sat in front of for a long period of time and looked at, and the fact that you're able to see the marks that he made and maybe think about the order that things got put down in, see the smearing, the scraping off, maybe even with fingernail, that object remains, and sort of thinking about why would anyone even do that. That is a painting that sort of set out to wanting to make. This is more like the painting that I got sort of educated about, thought about. And that was kind of confusing to me for a while. But ultimately, I think that they're both painters who are trying to do a similar thing, which is paint something that they've seen that excites them about just to make a painting about, and that probably, imagining the materials that they're going to use to make something that goes beyond what they are experiencing or seeing. And I just love the variety of things happening in there. So this is a Constable painting, Devon Vale. He's somebody who painted around his home a lot in England. And if I think about Hans Hoffman as his paintings maybe somewhat being generalized or more abstract about the things that he's looking at, I think about Constable as being very, very specific about what he's looking at and down to like the time of day and the season. And I love his use of browns, and also that he's describing something with his material, but ultimately I think the painting that he ended up with is descriptive of so much more of that. It sort of seems to be about the relationship between heaven and earth. This is a painter I got introduced to pretty early on, and I chose to show this painting because I think it has so many things I think about when I think about Cezanne. A lot to do with the structuring of the planes and the arrangement of the colors, and how those planes flatten out, but also how they're broken up by so many brushstrokes. And I think that's just like an impossible thing to do. This is a global woodcut, which is technically just makes my head kind of hurt to think about. But I also admire, I like the way the landscape is set up and the structure and the rising paths, and also this kind of idea of getting lost, the travelers just wandering through a landscape. This is a Sonia Delaunay. She was a painter, and people usually commented that what her fabrics looked like paintings. And I think that's just amazing that somebody can have a sensibility that's like everything they do. Like, oh, I was like painting. But this is a bedsheet that she made for her son. She kind of brought like a folk quality to this geometric abstraction. And I love, all the art that I've shown you and going to the museums and looking at art, but sometimes I think that the art that we really spend the most time with and live with can be the most meaningful to us. And this is the last painting I'm going to show you. This is the Mary Fedden painting. I really admire the directness with which she includes the things that she wants to be in her painting. She just puts it right there, and it's very refreshing. To me, as somebody maybe who thinks a lot about like the calculus of brush strokes when I'm working on my painting, it's kind of nice to see that there's space in there to look at these things and think about their arrangement on the picture. And I love the overall quality to it. There's like a dream-like quality to it. Where I don't know where she got the idea for this painting. You know, maybe she, in her sleep, maybe when she just woke up, maybe she gets to visit another planet from time to time where the ghouls don't exist like they do here. And so those are some of the paintings that I think about or have thought about over the past year or over the course of the time that I've been painting, and hopefully you'll see them in some way or other when I'm going through the rest of my work. So this is a painting that I made here at Mount Gretna the first summer that I was there, here in 2013, right before I went to grad school. I learned so much that summer. I think I painted probably like 2 or 3 paintings a day. And at the end of the time I was here, somebody said, like, why did you only paint one-shot paintings? And it had never occurred to me that I could actually do something else in that. But this is one of the last ones that I did here. I think technically we were thinking a lot about the importance of value in the paintings, and also I was able to sit through a demonstration by a fellow student who showed us how to color mix neutrals from primaries, and I think that really shook up a lot of my color. Thank you, Mia. So after that, I went to grad school at Boston University. It was a productive first semester, but nothing very meaningful came out of that other than I got told to focus. And so this is a drawing that I started over that winter break. And I sort of decided that that's what I was going to do while I was working on this drawing. And I probably worked on this drawing and another drawing for like the first month or so of that semester. And then one day I found John Walker and Richard Ryan standing in my studio, and I think they thought I was going to have a heart attack. And all they said was, these are beautiful drawings, you know. And so I think that sort of helped cement for me that I was on the right path. So I made those 2 drawings, and I still didn't know what to do. And one day I had a sculptor friend in my studio, and she said, well, aren't you going to paint them? That's what I would do if I was a painter. And it didn't really occur to me that that was something I could do either. It felt like a lot like 1 + 1 = 2, but I think there's a lot of times in painting where 1 + 1 equals a lot more than 2. So that's the painting that came after that drawing. And after that, I kind of got into like make a drawing, make a painting, make a drawing, make a painting. And I had never really worked with a cityscape before. And so I didn't really know what to do and like how much information to include and how many windows to paint or any of that. So I started looking at other painters that I admired and drawing from them and thinking, how could I see the world through their eyes? So that's the painting that came after that drawing. I think it's okay. It's still like kind of stagey and stiff. And I think those were both things that got said about this painting. But I think that there was more there for me to keep going at. And so that's what I did. And Boston is a beautiful city if you want to include grays in your painting, because there's so many grays. Everything is like an off color. And this is basically, studios sit above this road. It's Comm Ave, but I got to look at that and paint that almost every day. And also I kind of did it without any real background information. I think a lot of people came to my studio and were like, "Oh, you're a common applicator," and I had no idea that they had just seen this kind of time after time. And so for me, it was all really exciting and really new. This is a way that I started to think about my drawing with black and white acrylic paint and black and white charcoal. And I think one of the things that got said, I'd be working on these for a while, I'd work on the drawing for a couple of weeks, if not a month, and work on the painting, maybe a month until the seasons changed, I guess, and I found that I couldn't continue anymore. But this is actually a cropped image of that previous drawing, that I made a painting of. Just as one of the criticisms of my work at the time was it was kind of too overblown, and I was losing energy, and not actually painting the thing that I was seeing very well. And I think that's probably true through the magic of Photoshop. I can make this smaller painting and find maybe a more successful composition. This is another painting of the same spot, kind of trying to shake things up and do shorter work, and just having to deal with the different seasons, different elements, a lot of snow. And then this is the exact same view, like probably 3 months later. It's kind of amazing how much things could change based on what time of year it was in the city. And this was the last painting I made in that studio. And I knew I'd never get to paint in that studio again. I was like, I'm going to try to get everything up that I wanted to put in painting from that place in this painting. And so I didn't know what I was going to do after grad school, and I got to come to Mount Gretna again, which was amazing because I got to do something I hadn't done maybe but a handful of times that I was at BU, and that was to go outside, walk to where I was going to paint, and set up and be on site outside painting. And it's kind of an amazing experience, and that the community here supports that, and you're able to do it all summer. This was probably the last painting I made that summer, and I think I got a really good push from the faculty here. I was able to see things that I wanted to continue painting, and to keep going forward and seeing something positive come out of that work. So a big thank you to our faculty who were here that summer. After that, I did a few residencies in different places. Ultimately, the place that I kind of kept on going back to a couple of summers running was this place in Vermont called Putney. It's like an art-intensive summer camp for high school students in a non-traditional school setting. There, they don't do oil painting; they do acrylic only painting. So I had to think about switching how I was going to do things around. And another thing that they really emphasized was sort of not knowing what you're going to do and starting from a place of not being perfect, but going and trying things out and sort of trusting that the process is going to work. And so I thought about that a lot when I was working on this painting, and I probably worked on this painting all summer. That I was there every morning. I would just go to the lawn and set up and start painting. And so I kind of think about that type of painting as a different type of painting, like one's maybe way to approach the paintings that I do, which I think of as more like a construction, that I'm just going to keep on building things up as they go. And this, is another type of painting, still acrylic, that maybe I worked on like 3 hour-and-a-half sessions, so pretty quick. But when I was working on this, I really was thinking about trying to make all the paint that I was working with opaque, and really trying to come to terms with the organic shapes, and not letting go of the geometric things that I kind of wanted to hang on to. I think they're still there, but in a different way. So after I made that painting, this was a park that I go to very close to my house. I used to go there and walk my dog every morning, and then it just became me going there and painting every morning. And I started thinking about, what if I don't paint something that I always paint? And I would go and sit in the woods and draw and wonder, like, how can the picture plane work in that environment where doesn't really seem to be anything flat to hang on to. And this is a path that was basically on the side of the parking lot. And I started making this painting, not really knowing where it was going. I think because I was teaching like a class where I would go in and have to have a design for a painting or have everybody come out with a successful painting, that it sort of made me try to break down my painting and like, how do I, into stages, and like, how do I complete this design that I'm trying to make? And with this painting, I would have it in my studio at home and look at it and be like, I have no idea what I'm going to paint on this today, but I know it needs something. Like, I just go out there and start putting paint on it. And this is the next painting I made with the same kind of idea, same situation, same path, but trying to maybe think about the things that I had learned through the previous experience and put them into something where I understood a little bit more of the elements that I was controlling and trying to tune some things up and tune some things down. So this is a painting from a year later, a year's worth of painting between, and it's in oil. And this is at the end of 2020. And I sort of, in this painting, I think there was a couple paintings before this in that same spot in the park, where I thought about, well, what if I try to incorporate the elements that I was unfamiliar with, these really natural organic shapes, with the elements that I'm more familiar with, and like the compositions that I kind of enjoy putting together. And so this is a painting, and actually this was the second year I painted from that spot. The first year I made a painting that I thought was okay, and then later I looked at it and it's like, and so went back out there. There's a grayscale painting under there, which I started doing at some point in 2020, and I'll talk more about that. And there, at this park, I got to know the regulars, and so I started thinking about like putting why do I love this place, and trying to incorporate all those elements into it. This is a drawing from, I think it might have been winter 2019, but I'm going to get in my 2020 group because it feels relevant to those. And I started working with a painter in Raleigh. Her name is Ali Elberman, and she's a classical figure painter, and she teaches people classical figure painting, and that's something that I never really got like a long stayed experience with. And so after going to her studio for a while and doing figure drawings there, kind of the way I wanted to, seeing how she approached things, thinking like, okay, this is something I could learn more about. And one of the things that came out of that was wanting to re-explore my approach to how I set up paintings, and seeing how my drawings can function like my paintings. And this is a drawing that I felt like was getting into that territory. And this is a painting from that drawing. And this is the first oil painting I made in a long while. It wasn't very long. It was a very immediate painting. You can still see some of the ground in that. But seeing this painting, making that oil painting again, made me feel like, okay, I want to keep doing this. I want to follow up on this and see what starts to come out of that. And so this is the next painting or thereabouts that I made. And this one was more of a slow build up. And I'm using the earth palette. I'm using like a red ground, and sort of slowly getting towards color saturation. And I still was feeling like that's something that I want to explore a lot more. And just COVID was happening, everything was shutting down. A lot of really amazing people went out and got to work saving the world. And I thought, oh, no, I can make some art now, I'll have time. And so this is another painting a little bit later in the year from that spring, approaching it in a very similar way. This is in the house that I grew up in, and there's, my neighbors have kids the same age I was basically as I was when I moved there. And there was something about just being in that spot and hearing them be kids that was like so comforting and reassuring. And this is a painting from that summer. Where I live is definitely like a bubble. That summer has kind of rocked everything. And this was a painting that I made actually that spring. I was pretty happy about it when I made it, but I think this is also incorporates a lot of my frustrations with painting with acrylic paint. And in grad school, I had one of the professors come by my studio and was looking at my paintings, and he said, oh, blue sky, green grass, that's a pretty crappy poem. And for a long time I was like, no, it's not. And I think with this painting I was like, yeah, you're right. And so I had to rethink my approach, and this is the painting that I ended up making up from later, that's like towards fall. And I was like, yes, that's more like what I wanted to say. And so that's when I started doing more of like the like a grayscale acrylic painting and painting on top of that with the oils. And this is a drawing from later in the year. Sometimes it just became about finding a spot where I felt comfortable staying for a while and seeing what was there and what I could work with to make a painting from, and just knowing that, at the very least, I was comfortable being there. And this drawing still would take at least a week, and then try to make the painting from it. With really no color reference in my drawing at all. I don't know why I didn't think about doing that for a while. I only started doing that this year, kind of going over things with pastel, but I don't have any of those pictures. I think this is the last painting I'm going to show you. And I think, the thing about these paintings, that I don't know how successful they are. Maybe there's like an idealized version of this painting that I could follow up this with and make. But I think with these, I'm just going out there and trying to take the best notes for maybe that painting that I possibly can at the moment. And so the title of my talk was Put This Design in Your Carpet. And I'm really sorry that I didn't talk about carpets today. But that is a poem, the title of a poem that I read around the time that I made that first painting in undergrad. And it sounded a lot like something my beginning painting teacher would have told me to do. And so I want to read you that poem. Spiritual experience. It's a great river where ducks live happily and crows drown. The visible bowl of form contains food that is both nourishing and a source of heartburn. There is an unseen presence we honor that gives the gifts. Your water, we're the millstone. Your wind, we're dust blown up into shapes. Your spirit, we're the opening and closing of our hands. You're the clarity, we're this language that tries to say it. Your joy, we're all the different kinds of laughing. Any movement or sound is a profession of faith, as the millstone grinding is explaining how it believes in the river. No metaphor can say this, but I can't stop pointing to the beauty. Every moment and place says, put this design in your carpet. Thank you for letting me share.
use palette knives?
Okay, so the question is like, how much of the time do I use a palette knife while painting?
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
Like a lot.
Okay.
In some ways, it can be like when you have a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail. So, I'm sort of mixing, and then at the same time, like that color work, and it just kind of goes like that. So I have to remind myself that I do have brushes and that I should use them from time to time. Yeah, I wish I had shown some images of other painters who use palette knife a lot. That was something I was thinking about.
In the beginning of your talk, you talked about how the transformation of how you look at things, and I saw the transformation of how you put things on the canvas by what you showed us. But can you articulate the transformation of how you look at things?
Yeah, in a non-photographic way.
Yeah.
Like as you're working, the experience of the forms that you're working with, allowing those to take over.
What does that feel like?
Good.
I saw a lot of roads and paths in your painting. Are they symbols for you?
I think sometimes yes, and sometimes no. I like the fact that when I look at a painting, that yes, there's these things that can read like a story, and have those elements to it and sort of make sense literally. And I think that actually delivers a really big emotional punch. And I like having that in the work. And I think also a lot of times it's a flat color that I know what color it is, and it makes sense to use it. And it's always how I get where I'm going, going to paint.
I kind of noticed overall that I see movement and non-movement. I don't know, I just kind of see a statement about you on the paths, and that you're focused in on a particular movement, and you put your color, very intent use of color. It's not the same, it's not equal across the painting, but it spotlights it. I mean, there'll be a color that's no place else, and then you'll use it in that one area. So it's definitely a great style that you've got.
Thank you. I think it's taken me a long time to feel like color is something that's personal to me. But I think that's part of the journey.
Yeah, I'm pretty new to landscape painting.
When I started painting color on top of the black and white image, I started below the tree. That was my first session with color, just working on the shadows in the foreground. And then the next session, I was like, let's keep moving, get up there. So I started getting the color on the tree and maybe one sky color next to it, just so I could see like how does that work versus it. And so the clouds are something that got pushed, and some things stayed right from the first time that I went into the sky. But I think getting those adjacent colors in as early as possible is helpful for me to see and know how they're functioning and what's going to work as light and dark. And then I guess the other part of your question sort of implied that there was a right way of going about doing things. And I didn't know that way that you were talking about until I went to the Putney place, and all the kids were doing it. And they're like, this is how you make a landscape painting, back to front, right? I was like, oh, that's weird. But it worked. But I don't think that there's a right way to do things. I just think there are different ways to do things.
So when you're working on these pieces that are sort of void of like the structural elements, or just set against like a path in the woods, are you prioritizing strictly value then?
Well, I guess this one's weird because I still feel like there's something that I still need something to hang on to. Like I use the path and the trees, and definitely the horizontal and verticals. So I use the trees more as like my anchor. And then I guess no matter what, I think about how the space is going to work and how I'm going to move through that space and what things I want to connect, right? Like how many things do I want to have in the picture? That's something that I always in undergrad was like, this is what we're supposed to paint. I'm painting the whole thing, you know?
What's the scale of this work?
Oh yeah, so some of the paintings are pretty large. Like this one is probably, I mean, for me, that's like a large to medium format. The ones in grad school are larger than that. Some of them were like 5 or 6 feet. I was saying the other day that I usually take out a couple panels, and out of the couple panels that I take out, I'll paint on the biggest one. That's just the way it works.
How do you like pace these paintings?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I try to do 3-hour sessions at least. At some point when I got busier and I didn't have that amount of time, and also I would drive a lot. It was kind of what I was seeing was more like a photograph. I was seeing something and not getting to see the thing change at all. Just being like, I want to paint that like right now, just the way it is. And so then I'd have to like think about showing up the next day at that exact same moment and painting for a very short period of time just to try to get that one. And once it changed, I was like, okay, that would be a new painting. So yeah, like 3-hour sessions over the course of days or weeks right now. And the grad school paintings were over months.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.